Welcome into the podcast. Thanks for joining me. Today, I want to get into a trend that is really bizarre. Probably a month ago, I put out a blog about the AIM campaign. They claim to be coming at political issues from a biblical worldview, but when you really look at what they do, they're just trying to convince Christians that it's not so bad to vote for the more leftist party. They like to point out that there's problems with the Republican Party, and so they try to make those issues out to be so big that maybe you should consider, you could vote either way. And so, both parties have issues, so what's the difference? Now, I have said all along that this is not a political podcast. This is a podcast that's focused on biblical worldview of current events. I'm trying to help you process what is happening around you from a biblical perspective, and I do my best to do that. However, when someone or some organization sets itself up as an expert for Christian political thought, and they're leading people kind of down a dangerous road, it kind of puts all of us in a position where we kind of have to weigh in. So, on August 11th, David French, who along with Russell Moore head up the After Party, which also claims to help Christians take the right view of political issues, wrote an opinion piece in the New York Times, and it was titled, "To Save Conservatism from Itself, I'm Voting for Harris." So the bottom line of his point is that conservatism and evangelicalism have been damaged by being so closely attached to Donald Trump. So the best thing that they can do to make the point that we won't accept that new identity is by voting for Harris and ending Trump's reign over the Republican Party. So as I kind of dive into this, let me, and I would encourage you to go read it. I hate to give him more traffic, honestly, but I'm not trying to parse this for you. I don't have time to read it all here, and I'm not trying to parse this for you and hide what he actually said. So I'd love for you to read it. But let me kind of point out a few things that I think are semi-positives about what he said. First of all, he says that he's concerned that the Republican Party has backed away from abortion and traditional marriage. And according to him, this is his greatest concern. The Republican Party's platform's statement on abortion is not as strong as it was in 2020. So listen to what it said in 2020. It said, this is their Republican Party platform. It said, "Protect unborn life through every means available." All right, great. In 2024, it says, "We proudly stand for families and life." All right. He goes on to say, "We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights." So interesting wording, right? We're saying that we proudly stand for life. The 14th Amendment guarantees life. We're encouraging states to pass laws protecting those rights. And it says, after 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people. So they're saying they're spinning this in a positive standpoint, right? But it's not as strong. They're saying, hey, because of what we did, Roe versus Wade being overturned, we've now put it back in people's hands for them to be able to protect those rights. It says we will oppose late-term abortion. That's the problem that some people are having, is they seem to be more focused on the late term and not on we will protect life by any means necessary, while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. So in 2020, it clearly says protect unborn life through every means that are available. Trump is now actually, aside from the official platform, he is saying, hey, we're letting the states decide, but he is talking about a possible 16-week ban that bans it overall across the nation. So, yes, most Christians who take a biblical approach, naturally, or all Christians who take a biblical approach, would like to see him take a stronger approach. At the same time, when has a president ever talked about any kind of a national ban at any stage? So, Roe versus Wade has been overturned. It is back in the hands of the state. Some states are passing some pretty strict laws, and he's talking about a ban that at 16 weeks. So not strong enough, and so that's why I'm going to say I think it's a somewhat of a positive that he sheds light on this. So I would somewhat agree with him on that, although it also is still incremental progress in the right direction, right? It's not everything we want. As Christians, we want to hear them say exactly what we want them to say, but right now we don't have a 16-week ban in any of the states that are not banning it. So that's something to think about. So second thing is he also criticizes the RNC's choices for speakers at the convention, and absolutely there were some really low character people that spoke at that convention, and I didn't love that either. So I'm marking that down as a positive that he drew attention to that. And I do think that's not a trend in the right direction. The third thing is, and the biggest thing that he seems to be communicating is that Christianity is getting tagged as being synonymous with the MAGA movement. So the reason I say that that's a positive, he's saying that the direct quote is, Christians are becoming more Trumpian than culturally Christian. And so I will say I'm concerned about this. The problem is part of this issue is we're not in control of this, right? We can't intentionally do what would be the worst thing for the country, which is what he's proposing, in order to prove that we don't worship Trump. So I'll go ahead and address this one here. For the most part, this has been manufactured by the media. For the most part, I'm going to come back to our part in it. They want to use this argument in order to shame us for voting for Trump. And I've said this before on the podcast, but are we supposed to help the most godless administration in U.S. history get reelected, which pretty much this is a reelection. She's in office now, and we're going to keep her in office if she gets elected. Get reelected because the media thinks that we're too supportive of the person who's running against it. Are we literally going to let that, So now, the reason I listed this as a pretty decent point that he makes here is because there are some Christians that act like that Trump is the Messiah, and they can't admit where he's wrong and where he's been sinful, and they almost do seem to worship him. And that kind of thing has hurt evangelicalism. It has hurt Christians and the way that people view Christians. But for the most part, Christians are only supporting the best available candidate and trying to keep the country from being taken over by immoral laws, leftist thinking, and totalitarianism. So those are the three most positive things I can say about French's article. Now, let's get into some of his arguments that I think are not good arguments. The first thing is, he says that Trump has lied. Well, I'm sure that is true. You almost kind of expect that from all politicians. But one of the ones he really wants to focus in on is that Trump lied about the last election being stolen. Now, to me, that's not a lie, because the reason I think it's not a lie, first and foremost, is I believe that Donald Trump believes with all of his heart that the election was stolen. And there's little doubt that some super shady things happened there, right? Some people will say that these things were already tried in court and proven false. That statement alone is false. None of this was tried in court. Courts refused to hear the cases because they didn't want to be the ones that decided the election. Since then, some evidence has come out that there were problems in places like Arizona and Georgia, which turned out to be extremely crucial. And we know that changes in voting laws, like in Pennsylvania, made fraud easier, and those were not made constitutionally. Those changes were made by a branch that didn't have permission to make changes. And so, of course, we also know that big tech colluded with the government, actually, to censor Hunter Biden's laptop story right before the election. So at a minimum, we have to say that some super shady things were going on. And he uses also defamation lawsuits against Trump as proof that he lies about people. But in a normal world, that might be pretty good evidence if there wasn't such an obvious attempt to use lawfare to keep him from running again. And so, yes, he's been hit with every lawsuit and charges that he can be hit with. I'm not defending every single case or whatever, but it's honestly gotten ridiculous. So, second thing that he talks about is he says that Trump's movement has taken us far away from the party of Reagan. But policy-wise, I don't personally see that. In fact, I would have said he probably has been more like Reagan it seems like we've had a lot of kind of milquetoast Republicans that aren't really willing to stand for something and push for something. Reagan was supportive of the pro-life movement, but only Trump got something done about it, right? French doesn't want to give Trump credit for that, because he says abortions have actually gone up since the Dobbs decision. But getting it removed from being considered a constitutional right has to be the first step before anything else can get done, and he got that done. The third thing that he talks about is he also repeats what the media says about how violent the MAGA movement is. And of course, he felt like that Trump was responsible, as he said, for the violent political riot of January 6th, ignoring the fact that the mainstream media continues to ignore, that he asked people to peacefully and patriotically protest. And he told the protesters to go home once things got out of control. And he asked Pelosi to increase Capitol security, and she chose not to. And that the only person who was killed that day was an unarmed protester. He also ignores the fact that the left burned down entire cities in 2020, and that the person who was running against him actually bailed out people who were committing that violence. Or, excuse me, let's be technically accurate, led a charge to bail them out, a fundraising effort. I don't know that she personally gave towards it. And that the rhetoric that Trump is a threat to our democracy also led to an assassination attempt. He ignores all of that. So there's all of this political violence going on, and really where he needs to put the onus for all the political violence is really on the media that continues to be shady and dishonest in how they report things, and cause us to believe that the other side is just completely trying to destroy us. The fourth thing that he talks about is he tries to make the case that Kamala will stand up to Putin much better than Trump. Of course, her current administration let the Ukraine war happen, and Trump told Putin that he better not try that, and he didn't under Trump. So we kind of have hard evidence as to which approach works best. So I thought that was a strange thing for him to throw in. It feels like he's almost buying into the media-driven lie that Trump is Putin's is in his pocket, which has never shown to actually be true. So it's kind of clear that French kind of buys into all the mainstream media narratives that have been spun about Trump. Now, his case is that Christians voting for Kamala, it's going to separate the Republican Party from Trump. And it's basically going to teach the Republicans a lesson for identifying with Trump. But frankly, I don't think he understands how politics works. For instance, if after the Biden administration, Trump gets elected, okay, suppose Trump wins in a landslide, there's a good chance that the Democrat Party might actually reevaluate their focus on things like transing children, right? They're going to look at their policies that didn't sell well in this election and perhaps back off of them. Now, they might not be honest, right? I mean, they may still want those things to be accomplished, but they may say, hey, we need to quit talking about this so much. So let's turn it around. Say Kamala gets elected in a landslide. We would expect the Republican Party to actually reevaluate where they stand, right? They might say, hey, maybe this talking about all this border security didn't play well for us. Or maybe they might be asking if the overturning of Roe versus Wade has cost them votes. And then they might actually loosen up even more on the abortion position. They might be asking if they should go further in their support of LGBT issues, right? See, elections can affect the Overton window, that window of what is acceptable in culture and in government policies. And if we elect two straight administrations that support all of these things will become more mainstream, and they will become more solidified as what is normal and what is acceptable in our culture, which will mean that it is likely that the Republicans will move a little bit more in that direction. So that's not going to be helping ourselves at all as conservatives, as he says, by taking this kind of approach. We're going to have more on this right after this message.
I'm Dr. Neil Shenby.
And I'm Dr. Pat Sawyer.
We're so excited to tell you about our new book, Critical Dilemma, It'll help you understand critical social theories like critical race theory and queer theory from a Christian perspective.
Pre-order now at christianbook.com.
All right, now let's get into some issues that I have with some of the things that he says. First of all, I have an issue with the idea that he seems to be willing to hold Republicans accountable for moral issues, but doesn't seem to care about moral issues of the Democrat Party. So to make a point about some things you don't like about the moral stances of one party, you are going to vote for a party that is far worse in those same areas. That just doesn't make sense. Now, Harris has not been willing to put her platform out yet. She's going to have to here in the next couple of weeks because then they're finally having the Democrat National Convention. She hasn't been willing to answer any hard questions, so all we can do is kind of go on what she supported in the past. So here's a list of some of the things that she has supported in the past. She is, first of all out for abortion. She even legally went after a person who was outing Planned Parenthood for selling body parts. She isn't just not talking enough about being against it, which is the problem that he seems to have with Trump. She completely is for it. If she gets elected, she will absolutely push Congress to pass a law making all abortion legal. She has said we need to pass the national Roe law, right? And French is crazy to think that unhitching from Trump is worth letting something like that happen that may take another 50 years to undo. I'm going to do a whole episode on the biblical view on abortion, okay? I keep saying I'm going to do it. I haven't done it yet. But just for now, let's just assume that you realize that the Bible does not support abortion as we're talking about the biblical worldview of this situation. The second thing is this. She was the co-sponsor of the Women's Health Protection Act in 2019, which would have prevented all restrictions on abortion procedures. I mean, this is what she stands for. Also, she supported the California FACT Act, which forced pro-life clinics to offer info about getting an abortion. So in other words, you have to tell both sides of the stories. Abortion clinics do not have to tell both sides of the story, but pro-life clinics do. Then also, she supports adding gender identity to the Civil Rights Act, right? I mean, we know what will come out of that. Like, that's a mess, right? She was raised by a Marxist economist, and she nicely explained one day, you can look up the clip, why she supports equity instead of equality, which if you know anything about the difference between those terminologies, man, let me tell you, like, that's Marxism, right? Then also, she chose Tim Walz as her running mate, speaking of Marxists, who completes the most radical leftist ticket ever. And if you look at the things that he passed as Minnesota governor, I mean, even if there's a botched abortion and the baby's still alive, not saving the baby. I mean, it's just crazy. And so you can see last week's episode on what he says about socialism, but he also has made the statement, there is no guarantee of free speech for misinformation. Keep in mind, we're coming off of an administration that almost tried to form a ministry of disinformation. I mean, like, to decide, as the government to decide. So who gets to decide what misinformation is? And how often have we seen the media say this is misinformation, and then 6 months later it comes out, no, that was actually completely accurate. And so you can just take a look at what's going on in England right now about what it looks like when somebody takes that sort of position. Then in 2019, she supported the Do No Harm Act, which sought to remove religious rights for employees and companies. She will continue to promote trans ideology, including for children. And then the last thing is that, I mean, I could list a million things, but she was in charge of the border and only wanted more funding. This is important when she says, our bill got turned down for more funding for border agents. She only wanted more funding for agents to process the illegal migrants coming into the country. And so thus she is not concerned about sex trafficking, gang members, the terrorists, and the drugs that are coming across the border, which, I mean, just to me, I mean, do I even have to try to build a biblical case for why drugs and terrorism and things are not good for your country? I don't think I do. So French is willing to help all of that go forward to make a point. Everything that I just listed, he is willing to help make that go forward. His idea is that one group didn't come out strongly enough against some bad things, and so we will vote for the other party that is all for the bad things. So let me talk about this from a biblical perspective for a moment. And this is tough to do. I mean, some of this is almost just common sense, right? But what does the Bible say about this kind of thing? Well, I think we have to make the wisest choice from the choices that we have. If both candidates were actively pushing for unrestricted abortion or something like bringing back Jim Crow laws, like I could see writing someone in or just voting down ticket, voting the other races and not voting for president. Right? We would know that no matter what in a situation like that, we were going to get a candidate that is absolutely ungodly in their policies. Right? So I can understand, vote a third party, write somebody in, just forget the two top parties, right? They're both equally ungodly. But that is not the choice that we have right now. We have one candidate that is all in on trans ideology, allowing a constant flow of drugs into the country, abortion, socialism, censorship, and so many other unbiblical things. And we have another candidate that has already shown that he listens to religious leaders and has pushed for legislation that was, for the most part, moral and good. I can't really think of something that wasn't. So Psalm 1 and 2 says this. It says, "Blessed is the one that does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditates on his law day and night." Now, I am not saying that Trump is delighting in the law of the Lord and that he's meditating on his law day and night. I am not saying that at all. But the first part of that verse I think is really important when you ask the question, who are these candidates people, right? Who are they listening to? Who are they beholden to? Who do they keep company with? Now, neither of them are perfect humans. Neither of them is saying exactly all the right things that we would like to hear them say. But who are the people that they listen to and the people that they are trying to make happy? And I think that is a huge issue to weigh as we look at things we've already talked about. Another verse that is really important when it comes to making a wise decision in elections, I think, is Romans 13:4. And that is that it says that the people in authority, it says the one in authority is God's servant for your good. And so God's design is that a person that is in authority should be doing what is best for the people that they oversee. So if you have a chance to vote on your leaders like we do here in the U.S., you should seek to elect someone who will do what is best for the nation, and that best should be defined by what God says is good. So which candidate would create an economy where people can support their families? That's a good thing. Which candidate is going to make sure that people have freedom of speech? Which candidate will best stand up for unborn life? Which party is pushing twisted sex stuff at the kids? Because that wouldn't be best, right? Which party is pushing socialistic ideas? Which party supports open borders to leave the country less safe? Because that's not best for the people of the country. Like those kind of questions we have to ask. And then you think about Isaiah chapter 5, verse 20, and man, we're seeing this in our media right now, and we're also seeing it in our media to kind of cover for one particular party. And it says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness." This verse just reminds us to be wary of people who tell you that evil things are actually good. And that's what's going on when people use terms like gender affirming care, or they talk about, we want equality for, all of these, trans athletes who are actually putting women in danger, right? I mean, like they're saying, oh, it's so good. It's beautiful, isn't it? It's equality. Like, no, that's not good. Gender affirming care is a euphemism. It's calling something good that actually is not good. It leaves people scarred for life. Or calling abortion women's health care. Or silencing their detractors and calling it controlling misinformation and disinformation. And so, I think that's a biblical principle to think about as well. When we talk about making the wisest choice from the choices we have to look at which of the major candidates stacks up on all those questions we just talked about. How each of them stack up, really. And so it's my opinion. And I'm saying that, right? I'm saying we're now, in my opinion, okay? We just talked about some biblical principles. We talked about some unbiblical things that some people stand for, right? So I'm not saying I have Bible for this, but this just makes sense to me. And it's this: the idea of purely voting your conscience in the general election is not smart. Now that sounds super compromising, right? What do you mean? Like, so you're just going to like go against your conscience? Not really, because my conscience is fine with the fact that we have to keep the worst option out, okay? So if you think, I don't like either of these candidates, but one is going to push a completely unbiblical agenda, but I think I'll vote for a third party that can't possibly get elected, or I'll write somebody in, what you will be doing is actually helping the candidate with the most ungodly agenda get elected. And people say, well, I voted my conscience. I mean, honestly, my conscience can't be okay with that. I can't help the most ungodly agenda get elected. And so I think purely voting your conscience is best done in the primaries. Again, I'm talking my opinion here. But once the general election is set, you should still think about voting your conscience. You still think about, what does my conscience tell me? Like I said, if the choices are Hitler or Mussolini, then maybe you write somebody in, right? But when you have one candidate that is going to promote everything that is unchristian, and one that is not going to necessarily accomplish everything you want, but is not going to make things worse, and will probably get halfway to what you think is best, and in the past has accomplished some of the most important things to reverse things like abortion, that's the time to make sure that you do not help the most unchristian candidate get elected, right? And so to me, like, primaries are a great place to say, you know what, I'm going to vote purely my conscience. I'm going to take a flyer and hope everybody else votes their conscience, and that we get the most godly, best, candidate in whatever party you're a part of. That's what I'm going to do. But when the general election hits, and you really only have two candidates that really have a shot at getting elected, why in the world would you help the worst candidate get elected? That's the way I see this thing. And so I don't understand French's thinking. I don't understand his approach at all. I'm all for encouraging both parties to become more biblically conservative. That's why I don't understand. Like, for years, I hear all these Christians just hammering the Republican Party, but I don't hear anybody who calls himself a Christian telling the Democrat Party that they need to turn themselves around and focus more on biblical issues. I don't see any of that. So I don't understand why, to him, it's so important that if the Republican Party steps a little bit out of line with their platform this time, that we're going to make sure that they don't get elected, but we're going to let a situation that could be way worse get elected. I don't understand that thinking. I think this particular election is pretty important because I think we're on the brink of losing religious freedom. I think we're on the brink of losing freedom of speech. I mean, the totalitarian talk about how misinformation needs to be controlled is unreal. Like, that is the talk of people who can't defend their ideas, they can't put their ideas and the other ideas out there and let them be talked about because they know their ideas don't match up as well. As you've seen, memes that say the people who have, throughout history, the people that have limited free speech have never been the good guys, right? That say, well, hey, because we don't want some bad ideas to get out there, we're only going to allow what we're okay with. Man, that is so dangerous, right? I think we're on right on the brink of possibly losing the integrity of the Supreme Court. I think with the current makeup of the Supreme Court, if we get another administration like what we have now, Biden's already proposed it, right? I mean, we're on the brink of possibly stacking the Supreme Court. Now, let me be fair. I don't want to be a fearmonger, right? I have not yet heard that is the platform or that's the agenda. But Biden did say he wants term limits. He wants a code of ethics so that another branch can control the Supreme Court. A lot of scary things there. So French may not realize that if those things occur, it won't matter how conservative the Republican Party becomes, they will never be back in power. And so that's really something to think about. Now, to be honest, this is not an episode I wanted to do. I said up front, this is not a political podcast. That's not my goal. That's not what I'm trying to do. I want to keep you updated on the biblical approach of things that are going on around the world. But when someone this influential comes out and tells Christians what he thinks they should do, and it's this far off, it forces me and others like me to step into things that I don't usually talk about. So I do hope that you'll make sure that you like, you subscribe, and you share the content to help me get the word out about the podcast. And we will see you next Friday.